Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn,
and me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 17th episode of the Stream of Art podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about inspiration. But first, as always, we will do our little check-in. So, Robyn, how did your week go?
It was another productive one for me. I worked on my website and this happens, like the idea of keeping my website updated is really annoying and tedious and stuff like that. But then, so I usually just wait until there's a bunch of stuff I need to do.
Right.
And then I get sucked into it and it's like really fun when I don't know if it's fun's probably not the right word, but it's like once I start, I can't stop until it's completely kind of done, you know? So I got that all updated. I got stuff moved around the way I wanted to have it moved around. The text is kind of placeholder. Like I still need to kind of finesse it a little bit, but at least I have a page up about my commissions now, which I never had before. Yeah, so that felt good to do. And I did finish the commissions that I had to complete.
That's right.
Yes. And I shared pictures of those in Discord for anyone who's interested in checking it out.
And they're amazing. So if you need some inspiration for joining Discord, that should be enough. Go look at the beautiful paintings.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about them. They were a challenge to do, but I think I'm just like I feel very rusty. And now I feel a little bit more comfortable stepping back into that space again. But one thing I wanted to kind of, and I chatted to you about this before we started recording, I wanted to chat a bit about the fear of failure episode because there's been some stuff that's come up for me around a fear of judgment and fear of rejection that kind of made me think back to that episode. So, you know, now that I have my website updated and I actually have something on there saying, hey, I'm open for commissions and here's the process and this is what you do to contact me and here's the price list. I have all that up there. And the next step is now to actively promote myself on social media and on Pinterest. And well, Pinterest, I guess, is kind of social media. And now that I'm at that stage, I have this major block and I've realized I have this, it's not about my art being rejected or my art being judged. I'm very comfortable with people judging or rejecting my art. I know it's not for everyone, nor do I want it to be for everyone. Like there's people that my art is for, and those are the people I want to see it and to love it, you know? But I do feel this deep fear about being judged as a person or rejected as a person, and it extends to the podcast too. So I was saying to you, like on my Instagram account, I've shared this podcast once. Like I have it in my little bio thing. I think I have a link to it, and I haven't promoted it since. I haven't shared anything about it. I don't tell anyone that I do this. And there's kind of like, I want to stay hidden. I don't want people to hear me, because as long as people don't hear me, they're not going to be able to judge me. And it's this keeping myself intentionally small out of fear.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to share that and own that, because I think on the Fear of Failure podcast, I was talking about how like, oh, like failure, like I don't fear failure. Like failure is an opportunity for growth and blah, blah, blah. Like, and I do believe that, but I think in that episode, I hadn't realized, or I wasn't being honest with myself. I do have a very significant kind of fear of failure, specifically around like, how about if I put myself out there and everyone hates me, which is kind of like would feel like a failure as a human being.
Yeah.
Like I fail at being likable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've just been kind of navigating that. And one of the things I did to sort of, because I do believe in sort of exposure therapy. So one of the things, small steps I did was I'm part of a membership of artists, and it's quite a large group on there. And so I actually shared our podcast to them. Awesome. And I owned the fact that like I have this kind of fear of rejection, and I'm doing this intentionally to try to like help me overcome this. Yeah, so it felt so scary, and I almost deleted the whole post like 10 times. But I didn't. I
Yeah.
stuck with it, and I clicked the submit button, and then it's that kind of like, oh God, please don't hate me. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a open honesty time.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at, and just realizing like I need to work through this because I ultimately, as I want to sell my art, and in order to sell my art, I kind of need to sell myself.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out a way to be comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you opening up and sharing that with me and with everybody listening. And I'm really proud of you for putting yourself out there. That's a really difficult thing to do. And I think it's so easy to acknowledge something and to let it sort of sit and fester. But the fact that you then took action to start working on it, I think is going to be really beneficial for you. And I think it's just very telling about who you are as a person too, that, you know, for as much as you're dealing with these challenges, you know what you want enough to know that there are things you have to do to get there, and then you're willing to actually take it in whatever feels like a manageable thing for you to do in that moment, even though it's scary to do. So I definitely commend you for that. And welcome any new listeners who have joined us from Robyn's art group.
Please don't judge me. Only nice words or else I will crumble. I was going to say, how was your week?
My week, it was a bit of a mixed bag. I was really behind on some things, and that ended up cutting into this beautiful routine I have built, as I had to carve out some time to get some stuff done that I just gotten behind on. So one of the nice things is that because my routine is designed the way it is, there is a level of flexibility. So I still did my 8 to 10 music block, but it was the block that I usually have after breakfast that I had to use to get some other stuff finished up. So, you know, it was nice to still at least be able to get something in, because there's a time when I would have let my whole day become derailed because I had something that needed to be done. So I'm glad that I have something in place that still lets me make some progress on the stuff that really matters to me while being able to get stuff done that needs to get done. But it's made me realize just how overwhelmed I am right now, and how out of control things in my life feel. And something that a realization I came to this morning as I was doing my morning pages is that what I probably need to do is like a really, really good spring cleaning of like my life and my work. And yeah. And I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to go about accomplishing this, because I don't want to just completely scrap my routine just to get everything sorted, because that to me indulges too much of my all or nothing personality. And I'm really trying to keep that in balance. So what I'm thinking I might have to do is just kind of take it one day at a time, look at what I have to do. First of all, I definitely need to sit down and write down everything that I have to get done that needs to get, because it right now it's just existing in my head as this vague sense of like, I need to clean up everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably not true. There's like certain things that need to be done. There are going to be things that are higher priority. So I really just need to get all my ducks in a row and get my arms around everything, as Cal Newport would say. So I really need to sit down and like figure out what I need to do. And then I think I'm going to have to go just day by day, structuring in some time to still accommodate my music, because it really matters to me, but then give myself a good chunk of time to get something done. And to be really clear about it too, because I think that's something I really struggle with, is not knowing how to fill my time if it's very vague. If I've given myself a block of time and I'm just like, organization, that's way too vague. The reason why my routine musically works so well is because I'm very specific about what I'm going to be doing. So I write down exactly, this is what I'm working on today. And so I sit down and there's no guesswork. I just get it done.
Yeah.
But when there's too many options, I freeze. Like I tend to either do too much of everything and nothing really gets done, or I become so overwhelmed that I shut down and I do something else. I procrastinate because it just feels like too much, like I can't handle it. So
Yeah.
I think what I need is some specificity. Like I need to be able to say, okay, these are the things that I need to do. What's going to fit within, or what will likely fit within this block, or what can I put in this block? Because I'm also a terrible judge of how long things take, which is part of the problem as well. So I think it's going to take me, and this is something I was writing about in my journal, is I have to make peace with the fact that it's probably going to take me a really long time to get all of everything sorted out, which is why I need to structure it in a way that it can kind of unfold over a longer period of time where I'm just constantly making progress. So I'm going to have to just reframe how I do things within a day to say, I'm not expecting this to get finished. I just want to make progress on this one particular thing over this hour or 2 hour block or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just realizing as I've gone back into my routine, I can't fully enjoy it and make use out of it until I get the other stuff sorted. So I think this is a good time for it too, because we are now in spring and we're just coming to the end of the first quarter, which I did not have a great first quarter. That's as I'm thinking about getting into like my quarterly review, it was not great. I had a really rough one. So I think it's a great time for me to be evaluating what I might be able to change and what I can add or take away as I move into the second quarter. And I still have things I definitely want to accomplish. So yeah, it was a bit of a mix. It wasn't a bad week, but it was just a lot on my mind and a lot on my plate. And I think maybe for the first time recognizing just how badly I need to get things, in control as much as I can control them, of course. But yeah, so it was a good realization to have. And I am feeling a little bit better just knowing that I have somewhat of a clearer path going forward.
When you say that things feel like out of control or disorganized, like what things specifically are you talking about, if you feel like sharing?
Yeah, of course. It's a lot of it's like my work stuff. So I'm not as organized as I usually am when it comes to getting stuff like lesson prep and stuff, material I have to do for students. Like I'm finding a lot of that I'm doing more last minute, whereas before I was much better about having it structured at certain times. That just got off course over the last few months. So that's something too. And getting things organized as far as things I want to create. I have all these ideas.
Okay. Yes.
Of course, it's just, yeah. So it's a lot of it's mental stuff and work stuff. Some of it's my physical space really needs to be cleaned. I have papers that I need to go through. I have clutter. I have stuff that needs to get organized, and it's stuff I've been putting off for months. It's just because it feels so big, I just keep putting it off. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Just a lot of those kind of work / like important life related things and space related things. It's a lot of that. I think that's pretty universal, that's a big problem. I'm feeling too like I need to sort of sit down and maybe rethink some of what I'm doing musically as well.
Yeah.
Just, it's always good for me to do that. I feel like I'm more or less on a good path, but because I'm feeling so overwhelmed, and because it's something that's so important to me, I think that's something I have to address just to make sure I'm in a good place as far as all of that goes. So I'm sort of thinking even the stuff that I think is working, I'm going to reevaluate just in case I'm, as we talked about last week, getting into that habit, anything that's become really habitual, I want to make sure I'm still questioning whether it's the best way to do things. So it's big reflection and reviewing time as far as that stuff goes.
Yeah, and that when your brain is full, like when your space is kind of a little bit chaotic and your brain is full of all these ideas and thoughts and stuff like that, it does feel very chaos, right? Like it's just like chaos zone. And that sounds like a really good time to sit down and really and like take those new ideas and because it might be you might realize that you need to focus your attention in a different direction now. Like all those ideas might actually be an indicator that there's something else that you want to work towards or something, like
definitely.
Like I kind of had that a bit where I've decided to shift my focus to my commission work for now. Right. Mm-hmm. And that was preceding that was kind of a period of chaos and lots of ideas and like lots of directions I could go. And then there's that kind of quiet time where I had to sit down and really like think through the ideas that I've been jotting down and recording and really look at like what makes sense for me right now, what makes sense for my art right now. Yeah, it's like it's an uncomfortable place to be in the moment, but then I think the stuff that comes out of it can be really great. It can be quite a launching pad.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of my struggles over the past few months have come from not acknowledging the chaos as much. I think I felt maybe like once I just got back into the usual way I do things, I would just feel better, and I do feel better, but it didn't fix things like I thought it would. So
yeah,
I think I have to embrace the chaos more. Yeah. There's definitely, and I think too, I really struggle with feeling like I have to fit things in within my existing schedule.
Yes.
And I have to be willing to break it when it makes sense. But I think that the key for me is to make sure that I'm building some kind of a schedule, some kind of a routine, even if it doesn't conform to what I usually do. Because if I give myself, because sometimes I feel like what I want is a full day of just nothing so I can get everything sorted. But there's just there's too much. My brain just cannot get on board. It refuses because there's just too many things to do. So
yeah,
I definitely think if I can give myself that clarity of this is what you're doing today and then that's it, I think that will really help me to sift through that chaos. Because it's like it's a constant ongoing thing. And this is like really, I think ultimately years of this has been going on, where it's this constant steady feeling of things swirling around in the background. It's kind of like I'm sitting in a chair with like a twister behind me, and I'm just trying to like go about my business while all this stuff is being stirred up, while like houses and cows are being flung around. Like I'm trying to just pretend everything's fine. I'm like, there's nothing happening behind me, but there's something very clearly is very wrong and needs to be. I mean, in that case, you can't do anything about a twister. You just got to get out of the way. But you know, this is a twister of my own making, my own design. I can, you know, it wasn't intentional, but you know, it's still something that I can do something about if I just stop fighting it and stop distracting myself so I don't have to deal with the problems that I very clearly have to deal with.
And breaking it down into small chunks, like in terms of like the physical organizing your space. So like there's times where like I do a studio, like after big, you know, if I'm getting ready for an art show or something, I'll do a studio cleanup the day after. But it's interesting because I'll give myself the whole day, but I'm not really efficient with that time.
Same.
And we're doing at work, we're using Asana right now. Like we never used a productivity tool across the organization before, but that's been implemented and I love it. And so we've been doing a bunch of training with Asana around like productivity and ways to maximize and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And there is a theory, and I forget what it's called now. I was learning about it on Thursday, where like if you give yourself 3 hours for a task, that task will expand to take that 3 hours. And it might be where it expands in that you're putting it off, but kind of thinking about it, and then you do it at the last minute. Or it expands in that you are working on it to perfection. But the idea that like if you can give yourself too much time for things. And so like it's actually more efficient it's like give yourself less time and you will get more done. So like those limitations can actually be helpful in us maximizing our time. So we do have this kind of like belief that if we give ourselves all day, that's great. But it's like actually give yourself half of that and you will probably end up accomplishing more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's Parkinson's law.
Yes, that's
that the task will fill up the time allotted. So if you give it less time, it'll take that much time. Yeah, and I'm definitely somebody who struggles with that, where I give myself sometimes too much time to do something, and then that's the time it takes.
And it's so interesting because I like was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, it's so true. Like I will give myself way too much time, and I take that all that time, but I'm not efficient with it. But the stuff I can accomplish on like a tighter deadline, you know, it's like, man, if you gave that to me last week, I would have thought it would take this amount of time. But it's like, it doesn't actually. And we don't have a very good awareness of how much time we actually need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people in general are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially for something like, let's say I'm physically doing some cleaning in my space. do I ever get distracted by things?
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to pick up something, like especially because I've got books all over. I'll be, pulling books off of a shelf to do some dusting, and then as I put them back, I pick one up and flip through it. And then it's like 20 minutes has gone by. I'm like, oops. It's so easy. Whereas if I gave myself a specific amount of time and a specific task that needs to be accomplished, I think I would hopefully be able to stay on task much better.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking, like when I organize my closet, because I have all my paintings in my closet, and then it's like, taking some and moving them to the basement, and then I'm in the basement and I'm seeing that like the shelves down there are messy, so I start tidying those, and it's just like, that's like my mom's like that too, where she starts with one task and then she sets out to do one task, and then she ends up doing all these other things, and then she completely forgets about the original task she set out to do.
I really need it written out in black and white, like this is what you're doing, and then you have to have a reminder that pops up every once in a while, like this is what you're supposed to be doing, like are you still doing it? And if you're not, then you return, you like mark that down. I've maybe talked before about having really, really bad impulse control. So if I get the impulse to all of a sudden do something while I'm in the middle of something else, it's very hard for me to resist that.
Yes.
And again, if I've just given myself the objective of cleaning, that can include anything. So if all of a sudden, like I do that exact thing where I might start dusting or vacuuming and then I gotta water the plants, and so I'll do that, but I'll like only water half of them because then I get distracted by, I'm like, I should actually clean this too. So you end up feeling like you feel like you accomplished nothing.
It's so endearing though, because like as you're explaining that, I'm just picturing my mom in her garden, and like it's adorable because she starts out, she's gonna work on this part of the garden, and then like the next she's in the backyard way in the corner, like hanging out with her vegetables or something, right? Like it's just so like it's so funny to what people who have that kind of like way of moving through these sorts of tasks. It's just so funny to see them. And like, I wish there was like a time lapse video of just seeing like the wandering around, meandering, doing all these little things.
You can follow the train of thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just there is something so endearing about it.
Very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you feel like I've been doing so much, but then there's all these things I was supposed to do that I didn't get done.
Yeah. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, I meant to do that thing. You like, oh my God. Never actually got completed.
My intention is pure, but the execution is lacking.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on inspiration.
One thought that's always sort of kicked around in my head is like, is inspiration even necessary in order to create? Like there's, and you'll hear artists talk about this where it's like, you shouldn't wait until inspiration hits to paint or to make music or whatever. Like you just need to, and I agree to an extent, but for me, it kind of depends on what I'm doing. So for like my typical, like the sort of traditional landscape work, I don't need to be inspired so much. Like I can just go to the canvas and work on that, whether or not I feel like doing it, whether or not I feel inspired in the moment. But then there's some work, my more abstract work, where I do need to feel inspiration. It comes from a different part of me, and I need to be inspired in order for that part of me to come out onto canvas.
Right.
And what's interesting with me for inspiration, it's like that feeling, that headspace is very sensitive. And as soon as there's any kind of stress or anxiety, it's gone. Like it's
okay,
fleeting. And so what I've realized is I have to be like really, really careful to kind of foster the right environment for inspiration to even exist.
Right. Yeah.
So I actually have to take really good care of myself and my mind in order for me to be in the headspace where inspiration can even come in and can stay and linger. So that's been a really interesting revelation for me. And I do think like we talked about this when I think was it our first episode on seasonality? I don't remember, but inspiration and seasonality are a bit linked for me as well. Like there are times where I'm more inspired than other times, and I don't try to force it, but I do try to maintain the right headspace so that I am always open to it coming in.
Right.
And there are certain activities, like if we're talking about like what are some sort of like activities that kind of generate inspiration, like there are things that I can do that will help, but it's not like a light switch. It doesn't just flip on or off. Like it's just if I'm in the right headspace, if I'm in the season for inspiration, if things are aligning, then there are certain activities that will help kind of prompt it. And so like things like
right.
going for walks, being outside, because I'm like so much of my work is inspired by the landscape, of course. So being outdoors is pretty important. Going and talking to other artists can be like I find that art shows are hugely inspiring, and like I leave with so many different ideas of things I could try or do or whatever. There's not a lot. Like that's kind of it. Like getting outside, getting out of my everyday, talking to new people, having new experiences. And that doesn't even need to be like related to art. It can just be like the experience of going to like a restaurant I haven't gone to before or something, like something that is new. I feel like new is a really good thing for my brain.
Yeah, so it's like it thrives on novelty.
Yeah.
Stirring up that inspiration.
That's actually really interesting too, because I do think like with my abstract work, I work in series, right? And it will switch a lot from one series to the next. And that idea of novelty, I'll have to reflect more on that, because I think there's something there. Like I need novelty.
Yeah. I think it's really helpful to understand how you operate. And first of all, I love what you said about just taking care of yourself. I think that is so important. And it was something I think I overlooked for a lot of years. I mean, I've always, to some degree, taken pretty good care of myself just because that's kind of my personality. But there are definitely times I sacrificed things like sleep, like eating as well as I could have in the name of my music. Maybe not necessarily creating, but certainly in terms of trying to develop my craft. And I thought I was doing the noble thing of, sacrificing for the sake of having more time to practice. When really I've come to discover that is just a terrible thing to do to yourself, and you're not doing your craft or your art or your inspiration or creativity you're doing it a disservice by not taking good care of yourself, because you definitely need to be in that good headspace and to feel physically good, because depending on what your way of expressing your creativity is, it might be pretty physically demanding. Like I find playing an instrument can be very physically demanding, in terms of having to be sitting in a certain way for a certain amount of time, or if you have to be, I'm not sure how it works with painting. If you find like, if your arms get tired or something, if you're not in good enough shape to support whatever it is you have to do to get that idea out of your head, that's going to really hinder your ability to make the best art you can, and to really enjoy the process too. Because if it's a painful process or uncomfortable, you're going to be less inclined to engage with it. But if it feels good, if you feel good in your body and in your mind, then that process will naturally feel better, and it'll be easier to show up whether you feel inspired or not. But certainly you are cultivating the soil where that inspiration can grow. And it doesn't mean it's always going to grow. There's not always seeds that are planted, but it'll be more likely to grow if you've set everything up accordingly.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what you just said there, that was really lovely how you said it too. Seeds, soil, growth, blah, blah, blah. You said it in a much more lovely way than I just did. I just butchered
blah, blah, blah.
it. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something to remember, though, is that inspiration is not constant. I feel like we can make that mistake in thinking that it is a constant, and it isn't. It's like an emotion, really. It's fleeting. It comes and goes. Really nice when it's in our brain and in our body and all that, but it's not always there. Yeah.
You're mentioning the idea that people have about how you really don't need to be inspired to create. I think that's very true, but I think there is something to be said for feeling very inspired while you create, and it is wonderful when that happens. And that is something I think about not necessarily in terms of myself, because I definitely am not somebody who feels like I need to be inspired in the moment to create. I'll just do it. And some of that might just come down to the fact that I also have other things to do musically besides making music. Sometimes it is just practicing or learning something new. But, definitely I think a lot in terms of ways of cultivating inspiration, because that is a great place to come from. And it also helps you to create like your next thing. I think like you were talking about doing something really new as you go from different series. Yeah. Because and the way I think about it is like this. So for me, inspiration kind of comes from two places. I have like input where I'm taking things in, and then the output. So input would be things like listening to music, talking to other musicians or other artists. Like I'm always inspired. I get all these sorts of ideas from talking with you and talking with other creative people, reading about art or music or reading something, hearing a great conversation. So podcasts are amazing for that. So I have all these other sources of inspiration I can get where when I'm taking them in, stuff inside me will light up. Yeah. And that's always really great. Or I'll hear something or whatever. I'll learn something. That's a really big one. So some of the stuff I'm taking into my practice routine is stuff that then inspires me as I'm creating. And then the second part of that is the output part. So the act of creating inspires me, and it'll sort of create this like inspiration spiral where it just keeps going around and around. And that inevitably will hit a point where I've sort of drained that dry. So maybe I'm inspired by, like, again, using Ableton as an example, because that totally shifted the way I create music, and it has been such a source of inspiration. But I inevitably get to a point where I sort of have taken it as far as I can go, and then I have to go and learn something new. And so finding producers who are really well versed in Ableton is great, a great source of inspiration. So YouTube is a great example of that. I've been deeply inspired by so many musicians on YouTube, and that has really taken my music in a totally different direction. Just to find somebody who I really resonate with, who then points me in a new direction of music to listen to or stuff to try. And then the act of taking that in and creating output with all the stuff that I brought into my experience, that then makes me feel inspired. Like the act of creating makes me feel inspired to create more. And yeah, it's sort of like this cycle, and it kind of, something I sort of am cycling through. And I'm at different points. I've sort of had the realization recently that it's been a while since I've been really obsessed about something musically, and I'm kind of missing that. Like I had a huge jolt of inspiration, I was like 3 years ago now, in terms of my guitar playing, when I started listening to this podcast called The Guitar Hour that I love, with Tom Quayle and David Beebe and a couple other guys. And that's when I became obsessed with, really learning how to visualize the fretboard really well. I got into learning a lot of Tom Quayle stuff, and that it was an obsession. And I haven't felt that degree of obsession with something I'm learning in a while, and I really miss it. I'm always interested in the things I'm working on, and I'm very, I think these days, interested in writing music. But I love the feeling of being obsessed with something new musically, where it feels so exciting. I had that same experience when I got into watching Yannick Gwizdala's vlogs. He's an incredible bass player and band leader and composer, and I became obsessed with his stuff. I listened to his music constantly, and and that took me on this really exciting journey. Bob Reynolds too, I got into just before Yannick, and same thing. Like it took me on this journey of like wanting to really explore jazz more, and I love that feeling of excitement around something that then makes me want to either practice more, take what I'm doing more seriously, write more, create more. I had that feeling when I found Bent Knee for the first time. Like that, to me, beyond just finding music that I love listening to, I felt this sense of like, they make me want to be better at what I do. I think that's a really exciting feeling. Like, yes, I can do music every day, no problem. But there's definitely something to be said for the momentum that I get when I'm really excited about something and feel really inspired. It's like the difference between doing something while you're tired versus doing something while you've had like a bunch of caffeine. Yeah. You can still do the thing, but it doesn't quite feel the same. There's just this this spark that you feel when you're really lit up about something.
It's interesting, as you're saying, like I've definitely had those experiences with the input you're talking about, like those sort of input experiences that are very inspiring, light you up, get you like that feeling of like, oh, I just want to go home and paint now or something, right? I haven't had that experience for a long time though. I'm just realizing, I'm trying to remember the last time I kind of walked away from content or specific experience or whatever that kind of lit me up in that way. I'm like, wow, it's been a while, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. And you know what I'm wondering is if you and I maybe both have to do a little bit of deliberate input exploration.
Yeah,
like actively go seeking it, because a lot of the stuff that I was just talking about, I just kind of stumbled into it. It was just kind of by nature of some of the stuff I was consuming anyways. But because I'm not consuming as much YouTube, and I'm not, you know, I listen to a lot of music, but I'm not necessarily going to seek it out. I wonder if I have to be more deliberate about how I look for those things, just because I'm not opening myself up to the algorithm like I was at one point. I'm a little bit more closed off. And so I'm really just realizing how important that is to my experience. And so I should maybe be cultivating that deliberately, like making it I don't know. This is just a new idea, but it'd be fun to go explore some things and then just like see if anything sticks.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, for me personally, I'm wondering if, like, even the last art show I did, I didn't walk away feeling like, oh, I just want to go paint now. Like I did not, that was not, I've had that experience at art shows before, and I'm wondering if right now I'm in a phase where that kind of input isn't actually the right sort of input for me right now. So like looking at other artworks and stuff in the past has sparked ideas and has helped inspire me, but maybe right now I need something different. I need, like, I don't know, like maybe I need to listen to like TED Talks that are about personal growth or something, or maybe the inspiration will come from me doing hard things, like sharing more openly about myself, which is a big fear block right now for me, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think again, it's the novelty, it's the new experience. Like I am a little more shy on social media, so maybe having a new experience of being a bit more open and more engaged on that platform, like that will be a new experience that might help inspire. I don't know. That's not really input, I guess. That's now output that we're talking about. But it's a tricky thing. So it's kind of interesting because you can identify things to help sort of spark that inspiration, but those things might change on you. And I think it's, for me, it sounds like those things that I've identified in the past have actually kind of changed.
Yeah. And so it's a good time to get curious about trying some things and just experiment and see what happens. We can always, like we talked last week about doing like an art swap where, you know, we go do something art related and then do something music related and just see if that can, you know, invite trigger some kind of inspiration, just to take the time to enjoy a different art form. Yeah. Because definitely and I liked your idea of, you know, looking into like TED Talks and stuff like that. I'm often inspired by hearing people talk about music, which is why I like to talk about music. One of the reasons I just like to talk about it too. But I think I had such a positive influence from people just discussing this thing that I love so much and offering their perspective that I really appreciated that. And it what you were saying too about, you know, the act of doing hard things and how that can influence what you do. I think that's really true. And something I hear from a lot of songwriters certainly is the idea that what infuses their songs is having life experience. Yes. Yeah. And that makes me pretty concerned for my output at points, because I don't really do a lot. I haven't lived a lot of life. And I wonder if at some point that is going to stunt my music. But there's also this idea that sometimes people will actively seek out destructive life experiences for the sake of having something to write about. So
Yeah.
I'm also I don't want to fall into that camp. Like I feel like at this point I'm getting a lot of mileage out of the stuff I've dealt with already and the stuff I'm dealing with just in my head. I feel like that gives me a lot of mileage, but something definitely I have in the back of my mind is being something I'm probably going to need for like songwriting inspiration is to just go live my life finally so that I can have something else to write about rather than all the chaos and nonsense that goes on in my brain. But that is something I think that is probably pretty universal for creatives is finding that kind of inspiration from real life. Especially because we're so online all the time.
Getting outside of our own heads.
Yeah.
Because like you have a lot of life experience and you've lived a lot of life, but it's by you, I mean the royal here, you, like me and you, where it's like I've lived a lot of life, but it's all in my brain.
Yeah.
So it's and that's why I like getting outside and exploring new landscapes and stuff like that, because it brings me out and it reminds me of why I love painting landscape as much as I do, because there is something in nature that is just transcends. Like it's such a powerful experience, be like just out amongst trees, like there's just, and that's why landscape is the thing that I keep going back to, because there's something there for me. I can't even explain it, which makes it really hard for marketing purposes because I can't put it into words.
I'm sure you could work that into your marketing at some point. Like this needs no words or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm not a marketer, obviously.
Yeah. But I kind of wonder too, like if there's, so you've sort of talked about inspiration in terms of input and output. And I also wonder if there's sort of like inspiration in terms of loud and quiet. Because I'm thinking for me, like when I'm kind of working on like an experimental abstract landscape series, I get into that inspiration feedback loop where it's like, so there's some sort of input that sparks the idea and then I get obsessed with it. And then as I create, it fuels me to create more and more. And then that bucket of inspiration kind of, it drains slowly, and then I've kind of exhausted the idea, right?
Yeah.
That's like the loud inspiration for me, where it's like it's overpowering and I am fixated on that thing, like that the inspiration is so strong and then it runs its course.
Yeah. And
then I'm thinking with my, compared to my normal sort of traditional landscape painting, where it's a bit more of like I don't have the same compulsion towards it in terms of picking up the brush and working on it. But once I'm working on it, I love the feeling, but it's it's like a soft inspiration. There's still something there. It still sparks something, but it doesn't drain because I can keep doing it. And it's a bit of a push. Like I have to push myself a bit more because there's not that compulsion to get an idea out, right? So I have to push myself to work on it. But the kind of inspiration I feel as a result of working on it, I get that hit every time, but it's just gentle. So kind of thinking in terms of that too, I don't know, this is like a half-baked thought, but just like the soft, gentle inspiration versus the powerful inspiration,
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea of reframing inspiration to these different degrees. Because I think that's probably where I operate from, is there's a constant stream of just inspiration musically. Like that's just always, I'm never at a point where I'm completely disinterested in music. That just doesn't happen. But there are definitely like points where there's that very loud inspiration, and it's very much like you said, where it does eventually drain. But then there is that just constant stream I can tap into whenever I want, and it's there. And it might not push me in these new directions, but it'll keep me going. And the analogy I was thinking of is, the loud inspiration would be, like a waterfall or something that with like whatever kind of waterfall has an end to it. I'm trying to think if there's some way like a big flood of water drains and then kind of but it's like this big whoosh, where it just pushes everything forward versus like a tap where you have to turn it on, but it's always there and it's always steady.
Yes.
And it gives you what you need.
Yeah. And so for me, like what I've decided to do is to build, as the first step anyways, to build my business, to grow my business around my traditional landscapes.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that is the most reliable in terms of the inspiration it takes for me to create and I what I bring to it and the energy it requires of me. It's manageable, it's sustainable. Whereas the abstract landscape, which I think ultimately has more of my soul in it, like there's more of me in it, but it's not consistent, it's not reliable. I can't always make it happen, nor do I want to, because then it would rob those works of its power. Like those works are created in a specific moment of time, and I can't recapture it. And so then they become, I think that might be why to me they feel so much more powerful, because it is capturing a very specific, powerful moment in time.
Yeah.
So I've decided, and it feels, I've been really conflicted about it, because when you talk to other artists, it's like you want to do the work that really lights you up, that really is you on canvas. But for me, those works don't come out consistently enough for me to build a business on those. So they're a part of what I do, and I'm still going to share those and show those to the world and sell them if people want them. But where I'm focusing my efforts, where I'm focusing the business, is on the stuff that I know still lights me up, but the lighting isn't as intense and it doesn't flame out on me.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And I know there's other artists that struggle with this, where they have different lines and they try to figure out, how do I sell all of it? And my response is, don't. Focus on the thing you can be consistent with. And even if it's not the thing that is the most powerful expression of you, if it's the expression of you that is the most consistent, stick with that and continue to do the other stuff on the side and continue to show it. But focus the business, focus the growth of the business, the marketing, the language, the content, focus it around the thing that you can show up consistently to.
That's a really, really good strategy. And I guess it's kind of what I'm doing myself with like my teaching. Like the stuff that I know is going to be consistent is the stuff that I want to talk about and share, my ideas and things like that, because that's a little bit more consistent than being able to put out an album. I definitely feel like I think about my albums, I think the way you think about your abstract, where it's capturing a moment in time, and it's something you can, like people can take it or leave it. Like I'm gonna be selling my music eventually, but I don't want that to be the thing that I rely on for my financial stability. Because I love the idea. Yeah,
it's unstable.
I love the idea of exactly. And we need stability to create. And I mean, traditionally, the way you would do that is you would go and find a patron, and then you would just create at your own pace. But the way it's structured now is just not designed to do that. Like it's very difficult for somebody to create the stuff that really resonates with them and to make a living off of it. Hopefully there are avenues that open up. I mean, there's this whole thing right now, I'm sure musicians are aware, with James Blake. I don't know if he created it or he's just involved, but he's pioneering this streaming service called Vault, where artists will release unreleased music and you have to pay like $5 a month or something. You basically subscribe to them. It's this whole thing. It's because he's been very outspoken recently about just how unsustainable our current practices are for musicians, and how we devalue what they create. And I'm sure the art world is probably very much the same way. It's like everything's being devalued, but we need time and space to create, and so you're giving yourself that time by finding the consistent thing, working on that so that you've got something underneath you. And then when you have those seasons where you feel like all you want to do is your abstract, you can do that. I think that's going to be way more sustainable.
And then it takes the pressure off. And like I said, when I started talking about inspiration, for me, inspiration can't exist where there's stress and anxiety. And there's going to be stress
exactly.
and anxiety if I'm relying on this for my income, right? Whereas with the landscape work, the traditional kind of landscape work that I do, the inspiration comes from the doing of the thing, and I can show up and do the thing. So that's fine. The stress and the anxiety doesn't impact that line of work in the same way, which is another thing to consider too, right? Because like running an art business, running your own thing, being self-employed is stressful in many different ways.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that whatever you're creating doesn't die in that stressful environment. Whereas like, so if I were to focus purely on my abstract stuff, it couldn't live in that environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to create anything. But yeah, especially the stuff that really relies on you being in a good headspace. But yeah, it definitely, like, I can be super stressed out and I can still teach.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think looking for those things that
you can do regardless of what frame of mind you're in. And that's it. And it's helped clarify things for me too, like having that kind of like, here's the primary focus and here's the secondary focus. And I'm not giving up on one. I'm still I will let that part of me live and grow as it kind of comes to the surface. But I have my focus, and that has been a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it gives me direction too. Like, because I've been kind of flip-flopping between like two different styles of working, and it's hard to grow two things. It becomes tricky because it's like, what do you do? Like, do everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That really resonates. I definitely feel that tension as well of trying to decide what exactly to do, but wanting to do everything. So yeah, I think that's given me a lot to think about as far as restructuring where my focus is currently. Because I kind of feel like I know what direction I have to go in, but I think I have to make it very clear and then design my schedule to really accommodate the things I have to do to get there so that I can support making the album that I want to make.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like, it's annoying to have to think money because when we're talking about inspiration, but the reality is you have to think like, what is the thing that's going to bring in money reliably as well, right? When you're looking at living off of this. So for me, that's the other reason I think why I've kind of decided to focus on the traditional landscape, the commissions, because that's where I've seen the most success financially, which is still obviously not enough to sustain me. But yeah.
It also makes a good case for the people who want to pursue art or music or whatever on the side. So they have a steady job that they can just do without having, to put much thought into it. And then it does alleviate that stress of figuring out how to pay your bills. And a lot of people, like I know a lot of people like that who have really great jobs, make really good money. So they have this extra spending money they can invest into their hobby, they'll take it very seriously. I think that's if you are somebody who's that way inclined, do that. I think that's
100%. That's a really, really good point, because I could have been like, you know what, I'm just going to put all my energy into my abstract work. It's just going to be, it's going to be a side hustle, it'll ebb and flow, but it doesn't matter. But that is a very valid way to go about it, for sure. And then like you do art shows when you feel like it. But for me, I think what I realized is that because I think I got real with myself, and I decided like, I do want to make this into a full-time thing, which feels very scary to admit, because it feels like a complete pipe dream. And there's a lot of things that in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm not going to be able to make it happen for myself, that I won't follow through or whatever. So there's a lot of fear here. But I realized that like, if I'm serious about that, then I need to be serious and figure out what is the thing that I'm going to be able to produce every day. Yeah. And sell, Yeah. So I had to make different choices, which meant that I'm making a choice that I'm not following the loud inspiration, like I'm still letting that exist, but that's not what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on the quiet inspiration.
Yeah. I think the nice thing is that they support each other.
They do, yes.
So something like, for me, I always come back to practicing, working on stuff, I always have something musical to work on, whether I'm feeling that big burst of inspiration or not. But when I feel that big inspiration, all the work I've been doing to sustain my musicality is going to come and help me really take it as far as it can go. And then, the flip side of that is that really big inspiration pushes me even further forward, so that once it wanes, I'm going back to the sort of steady, quiet inspiration, but it's like a different place.
Yes.
So it's like upgrading your faucet or something.
Yeah.
So the water is like steadier, whatever, just to beat that analogy to death. But yeah, I think you've given me a lot to think about. I feel like I love that reframe, especially as far as like building a career. Like that's definitely, I know that that's something I have to really figure out where I have to place my focus.
It's really hard because there's this kind of modern philosophy around making art, and it's that art needs to come from a place of big inspiration. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, it's a little bit dead or something, right? Like there's a very pervasive sort of philosophy around that, and a misbelief, I think. And it's just so funny because you think of like that is a very modern concept. Mm-hmm. Art historically has been, like you were saying, you had patrons. You think of like the Italian Renaissance and stuff. Like artists weren't just making art unless they were being paid all the time. I mean, there would be, of course, that time where they were learning and they were practicing, but it was essentially a trade.
Yeah.
So this idea now that we paint from our hearts as like an expression of our internal self and all of that, or making music, same sort of concept, is a new idea. And so now it feels a bit like if you're not following that kind of loud inspiration, it's like it almost feels like an act of rebellion.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like I don't know what I'm trying to say. You're usually good at summarizing what I'm trying to say. What am I trying to say, Michelle?
You have to let me think about it. I got distracted by the cat.
I think, she's being cuddly.
A little bit. Yeah, when she's in a mood. Yeah, but I think the idea that it has to come from that big place just like does not work. It does not reflect the reality of our modern world, where you have to have something more reliable, because those big moments of inspiration just are not consistent.
And I guess my point too is like, and it's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
It's okay to focus on kind of a different elements or something that doesn't have, because I think that's where I'm struggling, is I feel like in order for art to be honest and authentic and valid, it needs to come from a place of big inspiration. Mm-hmm. And so for me to say no to that, I feel like a sellout almost. For me to go,
I see, yeah.
Yeah, for me to go to the consistent route, the reliable route, it feels like I'm selling out in order to make money. Which is so funny because
yes.
But that is kind of what you have to do. That's what I have to do.
Yeah, so it's the conflict of this romantic ideal of what the artist is versus the reality of what you have to do to survive. So we feel this internal conflict of like, okay, well, I'm going to do this thing so I can pay my bills and buy food, but at the same time, I feel this disconnect because I'm an artist, and that's not what artists do. We don't talk about money. We just like to drift off and make something and then put it out into the world, and it's our gift, and we don't need to eat. We don't that romantic ideal of the artist is very modern. Like that is a new thing. And so that's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
So that's where it's like, yes, I feel this kind of like a disconnect from that quote unquote artist. But I'm like, that artist isn't even, that's a new concept anyways. It doesn't work for me. So I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to revert, and I'm going to think of myself as a like 16th century artist.
Yeah.
They're like, they would have been talking about money because they would have been expected to get paid.
Yeah. That's very true. It's hopefully that's shifting, because I feel like you have more and more artists who are comfortable about talking about this sort of thing. The idea of thinking about yourself as not just an artist, but also an entrepreneur, where you have to take these things into account, and that there's a certain level of, you know, like marketing that needs to happen, strategy that needs to happen.
And it's a balancing act. Like, I'm still doing work that I want to do, but I'm also doing work that I think other people will want. And that, and that feels, that's the selling out part that kind of kicks in, where it's like, I get in my head about like, am I even creating for me anymore? Am I creating for other people? And if I'm creating for other people, does this make my art less arty?
Yeah.
Like, there's all that kind of like self-talk that comes in that I ultimately just have to ignore, because it's still part of me. Because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be able to show up and do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and I think that is a really important perspective to have, that just because you're selecting something that doesn't require the big inspiration doesn't mean it's not authentic or genuine to you.
Yes.
It's still something. I think this is something Cal Newport talks about as far as like people doing jobs that they're struggling with. He says, if there's something about your job that fundamentally disagrees with your values, that is an important sign that you need to leave. So I think if you are a creative person who's creating something that feels, it makes you feel like you're lying or you're misleading people or whatever. If you're doing anything that conflicts with one of your values, that's a bad sign. But obviously for you, something like painting landscapes does not conflict with your values. It's very genuine and something you appreciate, and I liked what you were saying before about, you know, having that experience in nature. And I feel like what you're trying to do is like capture a little piece of that and then like give that to people.
That is exactly.
So they can have that without having to be in nature. They can just go, oh yeah, like it's really beautiful. And you can just throw a painting.
Yeah, I got to look at my website, because I came up with a really nice way of describing what I'm trying to create through my landscapes. And I've forgotten hold on, I'm looking it up because I really liked it. Hopefully, if anyone takes this, I'm going to be real mad. I've described them as like mini moments that I'm creating mini moments that like, again, like it prompts that kind of feeling of being in nature. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to take what I see and what I experience outside.
Yeah.
And this is where like, there's an element there's a power and energy that you can't capture on camera. It just, you know, like you know how many times, right, have we taken a photo, and I say this on my website too, of like a place that's just completely awe-inspiring, like it's just beautiful. Yeah. We take that photo because we want to hold on to it. Like we want to hold on to that feeling so bad. And then you look back on that photo and you're like, it doesn't even, it's empty unless you're a photographer and can do the post-processing stuff.
Yeah.
It's extremely challenging to capture that kind of energy in a photo, and that's what I'm trying to do with my work.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what a lot of landscape artists are trying to do with their work, and we have different ways of capturing that energy, and for me a lot of it is through color.
Yeah.
So anyways, like the past couple of months has been really interesting because I've just been learning a lot more about like what I'm actually trying to accomplish, which has been hugely helpful, because it's hard to sell your work when you don't even know why you're doing it or what you're trying to do and what you're trying to ultimately give people. Like, this is what I want. This is the service that I'm providing.
Yeah. This is something we're going to have to come back to and talk about, because I think you and I have both had issues with figuring out how to go about selling ourselves. And it sounds like you've made a huge breakthrough just having that clarity.
Yeah.
This cat is being very weirdly affectionate.
Well, you were saying that you wanted an affectionate cat, and now you have one.
Yeah, but time and place, Meow. Time and place.
Aww. She's so cute.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely we'll come back to this conversation, because I think that is a universally challenging place to exist from when you are a creative person who is trying to build a business around what they produce. There is that battle between doing something that feels like it's genuine and that it's actually of value versus doing the things you know you have to do just to make a living.
Yeah.
which is sort of what I touched on last week, as I was bringing up again the topic of those people who sell, they sell like the easy answers. Like I'm definitely against that, and I'm never going to be somebody who promotes myself as somebody with all the answers. I do not have them, but I feel like I want to have more empathy for the people who are trying things to make a living. I think the assumption that it's bad to want to make money is so harmful to people, which is literally everybody who need money to survive.
That's true. And I guess it ultimately comes down to as well, like what they're doing doesn't align with your values, which is why you're not doing it. But with them, it does in some way. Like I don't, I guess I should probably practice being a little less judgmental as well. But
it's
one hill at a time.
Exactly. One thing at a time. I've been trying to work on this for a while. Yeah, just to have more. And this is true anytime I see somebody, with a sponsorship, with anything like that, to recognize what they're trying to accomplish and to not. Because I think we've probably all had the experience of, somebody we respect who then goes and tries to sell something and you feel it's like a little questionable.
Yes.
And generally, like, I know the people who talk about taking on sponsorships, they're often pretty picky. Like they'll try things, and if they don't like them, they won't take it on. And that I can really respect. But there's still a sense of like, oh, you're doing that for money. But I'm like, where is that coming from? That's obviously my own internal issue about this idea that, if you're doing something for the money, then it's bad and it's inauthentic, and that you're somebody who cannot be trusted. But I'm like, no, that's not the case. And to paint somebody with that brush when they've done nothing but be genuine and authentic and good, from where I can, from my perspective, I'm definitely having to unlearn a lot of that, because chances are pretty good at some point, if I'm putting my stuff out there, that's something I'm going to have to do to keep this whole machine running. And I just want to change my mindset around that, so that's a big one. I can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I've been working through, like my money mindset. And that is one thing that I have observed in myself, is this kind of, I see artists who are selling courses on how to make a living as an artist, and I get very critical, because to me, it's like the only reason you have made a living as an artist is because you're selling other people this course on how to make a living as an artist. Like, it seems a little hypocritical isn't the right word, but you see what I'm saying? Like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like So and then you see the fees that these people are charging, and I'm just like, how dare you? And I have been trying to challenge that, because every time I say how dare you to an artist who's trying to make a living, I'm denying myself that option in the future.
Yeah.
And I can't do that, because I want to make a living off of this. So I have to be okay with the fact that going forward, yes, I will be charging people for my work, and eventually I would like to do workshops, and I'll be charging people for that as well. And I'm not interested in teaching artists how to make a living off their art, because I just don't think I'm that person. But
same.
But at some point I might actually need to take one of those courses too, right? So it's like there's a lot of interesting self-talk around money. And even like my people who are wealthy, I've been working on, like, because I immediately have a certain opinion. I'll think they're greedy or selfish, or they hoard. Yeah. Like they're hoarding wealth. Like I have all these really awful ideas around people who are wealthy. And in some cases, probably true. In many cases, not true at all. And there's, I'm sure, so many people who have like an abundance of wealth who are also extremely generous.
Yeah.
So it's important, I think, because to work through that kind of money mindset stuff. There's all sorts of, and for me, there's all sorts of stuff I'm working on unpacking, and
I think we have a lot of messaging we've taken in from our society, and it makes us less kind, and it makes us less flexible in what we can do, and less resilient in our careers.
And it's made me closed off to the idea of bringing money in. which is a big problem because I need to bring money in.
Yes. Same. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to come back to this topic maybe when you and I have gotten a little bit further. When we can speak from a place of authority and not just speculation. No, but I feel like, this is another one of those topics I feel like we'll want to regularly come back to. And as much as I feel like I'm like you, like I don't think I'm the right person to try to help people make a living as a musician. That's just not where I feel like my strengths are. I think it's something inevitably we have to talk about, because if you are trying to build a musical life or an artistic life, and that's the avenue you want to take, as we're trying to figure that out because we're just getting started, I think we'll be able to offer some insights as we, have successes and inevitable failures as well as we try to figure this out.
Yeah. So once again, we kind of deviated from inspiration and talked about money. Just but all good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. This all ties in because I think it is a part of the larger conversation about artistry, inspiration, creativity versus business, money, entrepreneurship, all of marketing, all of that stuff. When really, if we can find a way to meld the two together in a way that works for us as creative people and people who want to contribute to the world, and live the lives that we want to live, I think if we can bring those two things together, that'll just help eliminate a lot of the confusion, a lot of the shame, a lot of the guilt, the regret, the stress, all of that.
Discomfort.
I think it's definitely something worth talking about. So yeah, I think it ties in.
Yeah, that was well said. And worth talking about too, because people listening might realize like maybe they've been on the path of wanting to make this into a business and have realized like actually no, like that the awkwardness that comes from melding those two things isn't for me. And that's fair enough. Yeah.
I will say that the reason why I'm working on building a career in music is because I have to. I can't do anything else. And this is just something not that I couldn't, of course I could, but I'm talking internally. I cannot bring myself to do anything else. It's just, again, the calling inside me is so strong that I have to see it through. And that has meant a lot of years of sacrifice, a lot of years of going without, a lot of trade-offs. And that definitely is not for everybody. I don't even know if it was for me 100%, but it's the sort of thing you're taking a gamble on yourself, really, because we don't know how things are going to go, but you're taking a chance because I think it's better to try if you feel that kind of pull than it is to live with a life full of regret because you didn't at least take a chance.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays there are so many viable options to build a career that if one avenue doesn't work, you just try another. It's going to be a lot of experimentation until the right thing sticks. But I think if you are thinking in this sort of diverse perspective of all these different avenues you can take, if you're thinking in terms of multiple streams of income and all of that, I think that is something that you can make work if you have the patience for it and all of that, the gumption.
Yeah. Ooh, good word.
Yeah. All right. So what's your week ahead look like?
I'm trying to remember what I have on for this week. I'll continue to kind of refine my website. Like I just want to read through the content and make sure it sounds okay, and might tweak a few things here and there. And then I think it's on to social media marketing strategy and trying to get a plan in place that I can follow easily enough. And yeah. Oh, and I got into an art show too, which is exciting for the end of...
yay!
Yeah, so I'm doing art show end of June, and I'm going to... On my website, when you go to my website, you'll see like I have my portfolio is broken into two, which is like my landscape work, and then my touring series is what I've called it. And that's that's the more abstract experimental stuff. So that's what I'll be showing at the art show at the end of June. And then I'll have a few kind of landscapes there too, just as a demo of what I can do for commissions.
Right.
So I'm excited about that. And I'll probably spend some time this week kind of thinking up some like display ideas and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. What's up for you?
I think I'm going to figure out some way to get started on getting some things organized. So I think this is going to be partially a continuation of my routine week because I'm getting a lot out of doing that. But also just experimenting with some things, maybe taking a day to just do a big sit down and a big mental dump just to get everything out of my head. Yeah, I think that's where I'm probably going to leave it for now. I think it'll be very much like we'll see what this week brings. Hopefully some more clarity and maybe a little bit of calm.
Yeah.
Mentally speaking. And because otherwise I don't think I have anything going on beyond the usual, lessons and stuff like that. So I definitely do want to think in terms of what are my next steps now that I'm getting into quarter 2, and like there's some stuff I wanted to do in quarter 1 that just didn't happen. I'm like, I gotta get on some stuff. So yeah, lots of thinking and planning and pondering,
reprioritizing potentially.
Yes,
too.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you everybody so much for listening. You can send questions and comments to streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We are at streamofartpodcast. You can, of course, follow Robyn on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. I don't really post much. That's something else I'm trying to think about is how I'm going to get that to work. So
yeah.
TBD as far as like proper content for that. But you can check out Robyn's website as well. Maybe get a commission.
Ooh. Buy art from me.
Yeah, get a mini moment. And you can join our Discord where we share, updates sometimes through the week. We have a channel for episode discussions. We'll let you know ahead of time what the topic is for the next episode. So if you have questions you want us to answer on the podcast, we can do that. And it's just we're hoping to build a nice community where creative folk can just join and share ideas, share struggles, share successes, maybe find people to collaborate with. So you're welcome to join if you're creative in any way. It doesn't matter, even if you don't think of yourself as an artist. If you are interested in creativity and personal growth and all of that sort of stuff, feel free to join. We just want it to be a really good, inspiring place. And you can add that to your list of ways to cultivate a little bit of inspiration.
Yeah.
Going to Discord. And I think that's it. So anybody who celebrates, enjoy your Easter. Although this is coming out technically after. So I hope you enjoyed your Easter. I kept forgetting that it was Easter. And it sneaks up on you. But anyways, I hope you all have a great week and a great weekend and all of that. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.